I walked through my own front door and nobody knew I was there. The house smelled like turkey and pumpkin pie. Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be in 2 days, but from the sounds coming from the dining room, the celebration had already started without me. I had cut my business trip short by 4 days. I wanted to surprise my wife. Instead, I got the surprise of my lifetime. Through the archway, I could see them all gathered around our dining table. My son, his wife, her parents, all raising glasses, laughing, toasting to something I couldn't quite hear. But my wife wasn't with them. I found her in the kitchen, standing at the sink, shoulders shaking, crying silently while she washed dishes that didn't need washing. Nobody came to check on her. Nobody cared. I stood in the shadows of my own home, watching my family fall apart. And in that moment, I understood everything without hearing a single word. But let me tell you how a man who spent 40 years building a life discovered that the people closest to him were planning to tear it all down. My name is Robert. I'm 65 years old. I own a construction company in Phoenix, Arizona. Started it when I was 25 with a pickup truck and a toolbox. Today, we're one of the largest residential builders in the Southwest. 15 million in annual revenue, 200 employees. A reputation I built one honest contract at a time. My wife Margaret is 62. We've been married for 38 years. She was a teacher when we met. Taught elementary school for 20 years before retiring to help me manage the office. She's the reason I survived those early years when we had more debts than dreams. She believed in me when nobody else did. We have one son, David. He's 34, got a degree in accounting, works at a firm in Scottsdale, or at least he did. I found out later he'd been let go 6 months ago and never told us. Too proud, too embarrassed, too busy spending money he didn't have. 5 years ago, he married Jennifer. She came from money, old Scottsdale money. Her father owns car dealerships across the state. Her mother sits on charity boards and looks down at people like us. People who actually work for a living. Since the wedding, David changed. He stopped calling, stopped visiting. Always had excuses. Jennifer needs me. Her family has events. We're busy with the house. The house I helped them buy, by the way. $200,000 for the down payment. A gift, not a loan, because that's what parents do, right? Margaret suffered through it quietly. She'd show me photos of our grandchildren on social media. Twin boys, 4 years old now. We saw them maybe twice a year, always on Jennifer's schedule. Always when it was convenient for her family. And every time Margaret mentioned how much it hurt, David had the same answer. Mom, don't guilt-trip me. We have our own life now. But they never had their own life when they needed money. A new car when David's broke down. Medical bills when Jennifer had complications with the pregnancy. Emergency funds for investments that never paid off. I gave and gave because he was my son, my only child. What else was I supposed to do? This November, I had a business trip to Texas. A potential partnership with a developer in Houston. Big opportunity. I was supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. Margaret wanted to come, but David had called saying they'd visit for Thanksgiving. First time in 3 years they'd spend the holiday at our house. Margaret was so happy she cried. She spent 2 weeks preparing. Cleaning rooms for the grandchildren. Buying toys. Planning the perfect menu. I left knowing she'd be surrounded by family. For the first week, everything seemed fine. Margaret sent me photos of the grandchildren playing in the backyard. Updates about cooking preparations. Normal, happy messages. But then something shifted. The messages got shorter. The calls got quieter. When I asked if everything was okay, she said yes too quickly. When I asked about David, she changed the subject. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, the way you feel a storm coming before the first cloud appears. So I made a decision. I closed the Houston deal early and flew home without telling anyone. I wanted to surprise Margaret. I wanted to see what was really happening in my house. I took a taxi from the airport. It was almost 7 in the evening when I arrived. The house was lit up like a celebration was happening inside. I could hear music, laughter. I let myself in through the side door, the one that leads through the laundry room. I moved quietly through my own home like a stranger. That's when I saw Margaret in the kitchen, crying at the sink. And in the dining room, I saw my son raising a glass with his in-laws, making a toast. "To new beginnings," Jennifer's father said. "To finally getting what we deserve." I pressed myself against the wall and listened. Jennifer was talking, her voice carrying that confident tone of someone who's never been told no. "The paperwork is almost ready. My lawyer says we just need Margaret's signature on the trust transfer. Once that's done, the house is in David's name." David's voice, weak as always. "I don't know, Jen. Dad's going to notice. He notices everything. Your father is in Texas chasing deals he doesn't need. By the time he gets back, it'll be done. Margaret just needs to sign the papers. She's practically agreed already." "She hasn't agreed. She said she needs to talk to Dad first." Jennifer's mother cut in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Margaret is just nervous. She's been alone in this big house, vulnerable, probably scared. She needs family to guide her, to help her see that this is the best thing for everyone." Jennifer again. "David, your parents are getting older. They don't need a house this size. They don't need a business this complicated. We're doing them a favor by taking over, simplifying their lives. And honestly, why should we wait 20 years to inherit what's rightfully ours?" Rightfully ours. Those words burned through me like acid. Jennifer's father added his voice. "The business, too. Robert's 65. He should be thinking about retirement. David should be learning to run the company. A gradual transition. We've already talked to an attorney about structuring it properly." David again, hesitating. "Dad will never agree to that. He built that company from nothing. Then we don't ask for agreement. We create circumstances. Your mother is the weak link. She'll do anything for you, for the grandchildren. We convince her it's for the best. She convinces Robert. And if Robert resists, well, there are ways to question an elderly man's competency, especially one who travels constantly and leaves his wife alone." I felt my blood turn to ice. They weren't just planning to take my house. They were planning to take everything. My business, my autonomy, my entire life's work, and they were going to use Margaret to do it. I moved silently to the kitchen doorway. Margaret saw me. Her eyes went wide with shock, with relief, with shame all at once. She opened her mouth to speak. I put a finger to my lips. "Don't say anything. Just come with me." She took my hand without hesitation. We slipped out the side door into the November night. I led her to my car parked down the street where the taxi had dropped me off. Once inside, she broke down completely. "Robert, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. They've been pressuring me for days. Jennifer keeps saying it's for the family, that we're too old for this house, that David deserves to build his future. And when I resist, she gets cold. She threatens to take the grandchildren away. She says I'll never see them again if I don't cooperate." My rage was cold, quiet, and absolute. "How long has this been going on?" "Since they arrived. The first night, Jennifer's father started talking about estate planning, tax benefits, protecting assets from probate. It sounded reasonable at first. But then the papers appeared. The pressure started. And Margaret, they've been treating you like this in our own home? They ignore me mostly. They use the house like it's theirs. They've rearranged furniture, gone through our files, taken inventory of everything. Jennifer's mother keeps commenting on what she'd change, what she'd update, as if she already lives here. And David just lets them. He doesn't defend me. He doesn't even look at me anymore." I held her while she cried, and I made a decision. This ended tonight, not tomorrow, not next week, tonight. I drove Margaret to the Scottsdale Princess, where I booked a suite. I told her to stay there, to rest, to not contact anyone until I called. Then I made my phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, a man who'd handled my business for 20 years. "I need documents tonight. A full restructuring. Everything goes into a trust with Margaret as sole beneficiary. David is removed from all inheritance. Complete disinheritance. I need it legal, and I need it filed before sunrise." He tried to talk me out of it. I told him what I'd heard. He stopped arguing. The second call was to a security company I'd worked with on job sites. "I need every lock in my house changed tonight. New security system. cameras on every entrance, codes that only my wife and I know. The third call was to a friend in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department. I need help removing trespassers from my property tonight. I have evidence of fraud, coercion, and conspiracy. He asked if I was sure. He reminded me this was family. I told him family doesn't conspire to steal from you. Family doesn't pressure a vulnerable woman. Family doesn't plan to question your competency to take your business. By midnight, my lawyer arrived with the documents. Every asset transferred to an irrevocable trust, Margaret as sole trustee and beneficiary. David specifically excluded with documented reasons. The construction company restructured with trusted employees, given partnership stakes, ensuring David could never claim control, even if something happened to me. At 2 a.m, the security team arrived. They worked quietly, professionally, new deadbolts on every door, new garage codes, a state-of-the-art camera system with cloud backup and direct notification to the sheriff's department. At 5:30, with the first light of dawn breaking over the desert mountains, I stood at my front door with 2 sheriff's deputies. I knocked, loudly. There was confusion inside, voices, movement. The door opened. Jennifer stood there in an expensive robe, her face arranging itself into a welcoming smile that froze when she saw the deputies. "What's going on? Where's Margaret?" I stepped forward. "Everyone in this house needs to leave. Immediately." David appeared behind her, disheveled, confused. "Dad? When did you get back? What is this?" "This is me reclaiming my home. You have 30 minutes to gather your belongings and leave. You can't do this. This is our family's house. This is my house, my name on the deed, my money that built it. And as of 4 hours ago, it's protected in a trust that you will never, ever touch." Jennifer's father pushed forward, trying to use his bulk to intimidate. "Now listen here, Robert. Let's talk about this like reasonable men. There's no need for police involvement in a family discussion. The discussion ended when you conspired to steal my property, when you pressured my wife, when you made plans to question my competency. I have recordings. I have evidence. And I have zero patience for thieves who hide behind family connections." "Recordings? What recordings?" I held up my phone. "Every word from last night's dinner. Your toasts, your plans, your schemes, all documented, all admissible. So here are your choices. Leave quietly in the next 30 minutes, or I have you arrested for trespassing and begin criminal proceedings for conspiracy to commit fraud." The color drained from Jennifer's father's face. He was used to intimidating people, not being intimidated. David tried one last time. "Dad, please. We can explain. It was just talk. We weren't actually going to." "You weren't going to what, David? Steal my house? Take my business? Question my mental competency? Which part wasn't real?" He had no answer. He just stood there, a 34-year-old man who had never learned to stand on his own, finally seeing that his choices had consequences. They packed in silence. Jennifer's parents wouldn't even look at me. Jennifer muttered about lawyers, about lawsuits, about how I'd regret this. I ignored her. David kept trying to approach me, to explain, to apologize. I turned away every time. At 6:15, I watched them load their cars. The twins were confused, sleepy, asking why they had to leave. That hurt. Those innocent children dragged into their parents' mess. But I couldn't let that weakness change what needed to happen. As David's car pulled out of the driveway, he rolled down his window. "Dad, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at my son, this stranger who wore my father's eyes. "Sorry isn't enough, David. Maybe in 5 years, if you learn what family actually means, we can talk. Until then, you have nothing I want to hear." I watched them drive away. Then I went inside, locked the new doors, and called Margaret. "It's done. Come home." The weeks that followed were strange. Margaret and I moved through our house like survivors of a disaster, picking up pieces, trying to rebuild. The guest rooms where the grandchildren had slept were too quiet. The dining table where the conspiracy had been celebrated was too large. Everything echoed with betrayal. We received messages, angry emails from Jennifer's parents threatening lawsuits that never materialized, Desperate texts from David begging for another chance. Cold silence from Jennifer, who was apparently too important to apologize herself. I ignored them all. Margaret wanted to respond to David, mother's instinct fighting against justified anger. But she understood why we couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. 3 months later, I learned David had been fired from his accounting firm 6 months before Thanksgiving. He'd been living off credit cards and Jennifer's family money. The pressure to take our assets wasn't just greed. It was desperation. He was drowning and saw stealing from his parents as the only life raft. That didn't excuse it. But it explained it. A year after Thanksgiving, Jennifer filed for divorce. The marriage collapsed under the weight of failed schemes and financial ruin. David got partial custody of the twins. He moved into a small apartment. He got a job at a small accounting firm, starting over at entry level. Through mutual friends, I monitored his progress. He worked hard. He didn't complain. He didn't ask us for money. For the first time in his life, David was actually building something instead of expecting it to be given. 18 months after that Thanksgiving, David sent a letter, not asking for forgiveness, not making excuses, just sharing his life. He talked about the twins, about his small apartment, about learning to cook because he couldn't afford restaurants. He talked about therapy, about understanding how Jennifer and her family had influenced him, but also about accepting responsibility for his choices. He didn't blame anyone but himself. He said he thought about us every day. He said the grandchildren asked about us. He said he'd wait as long as it took. Margaret cried reading it. She showed it to me. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think words are cheap. Actions over years are what matter. But the children, Robert, they're innocent. I know. And that's the hardest part. Punishing David means punishing them too." We didn't respond. Not yet. The wound was still too fresh, the trust too shattered. 2 years after Thanksgiving, I created a test. Through a business associate, I had David approached with an opportunity, a construction project that needed accounting oversight, good money, career advancement. But the contract included a problematic clause that gave the client unreasonable control over payment terms. A desperate man would sign it without question. A man of integrity would push back. David pushed back. He requested fair terms. He protected his professional interests even when it meant potentially losing the opportunity. He passed. I watched him for another year. Consistent work, growing reputation, good father, according to reports. Taking the twins to parks, coaching their soccer team, being present in a way he never was before. 3 years after that Thanksgiving, I made a decision. I called David directly. For the first time in 3 years, I heard my son's voice. "Dad, is that really you? Come to dinner tomorrow. Just you. 6 o'clock. He was there at 5:30, nervous, barely able to sit still. When I opened the door, I saw a different man. Thinner, older, humbler, real. We sat on the patio where I'd taught him to throw a baseball 30 years ago. Margaret brought coffee but gave us space. "I want to understand," I said. "Not excuses. Just the truth. How did my son become someone who could conspire against his parents?" David looked at the desert sunset for a long time before answering. "I was weak, Dad. Always was. I rode your name, your success, your connections. Never built anything myself. And when Jennifer came along, she made me feel important. But her version of important meant having things. Houses, status, money. And when I couldn't provide them myself, when I failed at everything I tried, she and her family offered a shortcut. Take it from your parents. They don't need it all. You deserve it. And you believe that?" I wanted to believe it. It was easier than admitting I was a failure. Easier than telling you I'd lost my job. Easier than being honest about who I'd become. And now? Now I know there are no shortcuts. Now I know that taking from you wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have just made me a thief on top of being a failure. Now I understand that the life I have, small apartment, regular job, weekends with my kids, that's more real than anything Jennifer's family offered. We talked for hours. About his childhood. About my failures as a father, too. About expectations I'd set that maybe were too high. about support I'd given that maybe became a crutch instead of a help. It wasn't easy. Real conversations never are. At the end of the night, I told him where we stood. This is a beginning, David, not forgiveness. Not reconciliation, a beginning. You'll see us occasionally. The grandchildren will know us. But trust, rebuild slowly. One honest day at a time, he cried. For the first time since he was a child, I saw my son cry without shame. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for the chance. I won't waste it. 4 years after that Thanksgiving, David remarried. A woman named Sarah, a nurse. No family money, no pretensions. Just a good person who loved my son for who he was becoming, not for what he might inherit. We attended the wedding. Small ceremony. Backyard of a friend's house. Margaret cried through the whole thing. David asked me to say a few words. I talked about second chances, about earning your way back, about the difference between entitlement and gratitude. 5 years after that Thanksgiving, David came to me with an opportunity, a business venture. He'd been offered a partnership in a construction firm. He needed capital. I need to be honest, Dad. I'm not asking for a gift. I'm asking for a loan, formal terms, interest, payment schedule, everything documented. If I fail, if I miss payments, there are consequences. I understand that. I looked at my son, at the man he'd become, at the 5 years of consistent effort, honest work, and genuine transformation. I'll fund it. Full loan terms, market interest. And David, if you succeed, the profits are yours. You'll have earned them. He succeeded. Within 3 years, the firm was thriving. He paid back every dollar, ahead of schedule. And when he made his first major profit, he donated a portion to the charity Margaret and I had established for children's education. He didn't tell us about the donation. We found out through the charity director. That's when I knew the change was real. He wasn't performing for an audience anymore. He was just being the man he should have been all along. Last month, 7 years after that Thanksgiving, I updated my will. David now receives 30%. Not because he's my son, but because he demonstrated, over 7 long years, that character can be rebuilt. That failure isn't final. That trust, once shattered, can be slowly, carefully, honestly repaired. The remaining 70% still goes to charity, to foundations that help people build better lives. Because that money came from 40 years of honest work, and it should go to honest purposes. When I told David about the change, he didn't celebrate. He just nodded. Thank you, Dad. But honestly, if you left me nothing, I'd understand. What I have now, relationship with you and Mom, my kids knowing their grandparents, Sunday dinners in the house I almost stole, that's worth more than money. That's everything. If you're listening to this on Silver Vengeance, I want you to understand something. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family is built on respect earned every single day. I came home early for Thanksgiving expecting warmth and found conspiracy. I discovered my wife crying in the kitchen while my son celebrated my future theft in my dining room. I had a choice. Accept it. Make peace. Preserve a fake relationship based on manipulation and greed. Or fight back. Protect what I'd built. Demand accountability, even from those I loved most. I chose to fight. And yes, it cost me years with my son, years with my grandchildren, years of holidays alone, of empty chairs at Christmas, of wondering if I'd been too harsh. But it also gave David something no inheritance ever could, the chance to become a real man, to build his own life, to earn his place at the table, instead of just expecting it to be set for him. Today, my grandchildren call me Grandpa Bob. They run through the house I almost lost, laughing, playing, completely unaware of how close we came to never knowing each other. My son calls me every week, not because he has to, because he wants to. My daughter-in-law Sarah has become the daughter I never had. And Margaret? Margaret smiles now. Real smiles, not the brave face she wore for years while our family fractured. She says forgiving David was the best thing we ever did. I remind her that we didn't forgive him. We gave him the opportunity to earn forgiveness through years of consistent action. There's a difference, an important one. Easy forgiveness teaches nothing. It tells people their actions don't matter, that consequences are negotiable, that betrayal is just a speed bump on the way to getting what you want. Hard forgiveness, earned over years of demonstrated change, transforms people. It tells them that redemption is possible, but never cheap. That trust is precious because it takes so long to rebuild. That family is worth fighting for, but only when everyone fights together. If my story teaches anything, let it be this: protect what you build. Demand respect from those you love. And if someone betrays you, even your own child, make the consequences real, not out of cruelty, out of love. Because sometimes the hardest thing you can do for someone is let them fall far enough to finally learn to stand on their own. That Thanksgiving 7 years ago was the worst day of my life. But everything that came after, the rebuilding, the transformation, the slow repair of a fractured family, that came from one decision, the decision to not accept betrayal, to demand better, to believe that my son could become more than the weak man who conspired against me. He did become more, and our family, rebuilt on honesty instead of expectation, on earned trust instead of inherited obligation, that family is stronger than anything we had before. So thank you for listening. And if you're out there discovering your own conspiracy, finding your own wife crying alone while others celebrate her pain, know this: there is a path through it. It's painful and long, and sometimes impossibly hard. But on the other side is something real, something worth all the struggle to reach. From Phoenix, at 65 years old, with a family I almost lost and fought to rebuild, I wish you wisdom and courage. The wisdom to see betrayal for what it is, and the courage to demand better from the people you love most.